Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our latest TMA virtual briefing of 2025. We'll be discussing the latest action in Springfield and how energy tax and mass transit legislation passed in last week's veto session will impact small and mid-sized manufacturers. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant. I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA state lobbyist David Curtin, as well as a very special guest, State Senator Terri Bryant of Murphysboro. Good morning, David and Senator Bryant.
Good morning. Glad to see you both.
Yes, thanks for being here. Well, we're going to spend the next half hour discussing key legislation that was passed in last week's veto session and the potential impact it could have on our TMA members. At the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of Senator Bryant by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. Now, I'll turn it over to State Lobbyist David Curtin, who will introduce our special guest and get her thoughts on the veto session. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Senator Bryant, especially after a very interesting week last week at the end of veto session in Springfield, and we'll get to that. But before we do, can you tell our TMA members a little bit about yourself and the district you represent?
Sure. Yeah. So I represent Senate District 58. I call it Illinois Coast to Coast. I am the second most southern district, representing all or parts of 14 counties, and I go from Indiana to Missouri. And so if you think of it just a little bit north of the Ohio River, to the Wabash, where the Wabash is, and then all the way over to the Mississippi. It's a very conservative district if you take out the town of Carbondale, which is kind of an anomaly. I served 6 years in the House, and now I'm in my 6th year in the Senate, serving as an assistant minority leader. And then I also serve as the ranking Republican on behavioral and mental health and on the energy committees.
Great. Yeah, and we'll want to talk about that. Well, manufacturers in the U.S. were the key beneficiaries of the federal One Big Beautiful Bill Act. But last week, the governor and state legislature passed a law saying Illinois was not going to participate in two of the provisions. Basically, the governor and legislature told Illinois manufacturers, when you file your taxes, you can get bonus depreciations of 100% expenses in the first year for equipment and buildings, but not from the state. You can get it from the feds, but not from the state. So why did they do it, and what does that mean for Illinois manufacturers?
Well, I mean, almost everything that we'll talk about today, the whys of what happened is primarily because we have a $52.5 billion budget in Illinois for fiscal 26. It's the largest budget in the history of Illinois. And every time we turn around, there is a need to try to fill the hole that Republicans already knew was going to be there, because we talked a lot about it during our regular spring session, believing that there was at least a $200 to $400 million hole, even if and some people said up to $2 billion for a hole. So every time we hit a bump, we're going to have to try to find the money to fill that hole. And so in this case, I believe that hole is going to be try to be filled on the backs of manufacturers with this and a couple other areas. We'll see some transit stuff too that got filled in. But primarily, if you think about the GOMB, or the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, determined that if we did not decouple from the federal plan, that we would see what they called a negative of $144.1 million. What that means is basically that fiscal impact. So in essence, that means that you're either going to have to find the money in some other place where you cut, or you have to increase taxes by $144.1 million. So in this case, on that issue alone, which was what you're talking about, the bonus depreciation. So instead of instead of getting the breaks that you would have gotten in the state under the One Big Beautiful Bill, now you basically are going to have to depreciate that. I think it's over 37 or 38 years. So that's $144.1 million tax increase to manufacturers. And then the second component of that was some terminology that had to do with what's called the global intangible low tax income. And I am not an accountant, so some of this I'm having to read off of my notes a little bit. I try to break things down to stuff that I can understand, which is generally Economics 101. And Economics 101 shows me that GOMB was projecting also a negative on that issue of $90.1 million in fiscal 26. So putting together the 144 and the 90 million, we're upwards of $250 million that had to be found. And that find was in a tax increase, basically, that's going to go to manufacturers.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's go to energy. Now, you're minority spokesperson on the Senate Energy Committee, and I have to ask you about that huge energy bill they just passed. So what's in it and what's not in it?
Well, what is not in it is relief for high energy costs. What was being spun out to people was that this is going to be a rate decrease because everyone was hurting after this last summer. Now, I know a lot of the folks that are joining us today are maybe in the PJM area. This affects PJM as much as it does the MISO region. I happen to live in the MISO region. So the high cost of energy was exponentially higher for us than it was PJM. But if you remember under CEJA, we were promised by the projections that were made that people's energy costs would not go up more than individuals, residential, would not go up more than $4.35 a month. We know that in the PJM market, residential went up by 45%, and in the MISO region, about 125%. So on a personal level, like I would normally pay in June, maybe $250 a month for my energy costs. I turned my thermostat to 75 this summer, and my energy costs in June were still 870. So went from 270 to 870. And so the reason I'm throwing that in under CEJA is the same people who made projections that said our energy costs were not going to go over that $435 a month are the same people who made projections in Senate Bill 25 where they said that we were going to see some decreases. But the more we pressed, the more we found out that in order for those decreases to come, that the projections have to be right. So the people making the projections are the ones that we already don't believe anymore. In addition to that, baked into it's a 1,050-page bill, baked into its pages 211 onto 212. If listeners would look at the bill and then look at line 2 on page 212, there is language there that says shall increase. And then it goes on to say how much those increases are going to be over the years. So in the bill itself is guaranteed rate increases. When I asked Senator Stottleman, who was the Senate sponsor of the bill, I said, I'm giving you the page and line number for the guaranteed rate increase. Please tell me where the guaranteed rate decrease is in the bill. And he could not give me that because it's not in there. There is no guaranteed rate decrease. But what is in there is the removal of caps. So what we've seen in every other form of energy, nuclear, coal, oil and gas, there are caps on how high those energy costs can go. Under Senate Bill 25, House Amendment 4, which became the bill, we know that the caps are removed. We're pretty confident, we being the Republican side of the aisle, because none of us either in the House or the Senate voted for this bill, that this is going to be a rate increase of roughly $8 billion. So pretty good. We have pretty good data that will show that. So it's a massive rate increase. It takes the caps off. I would say some of the other more egregious parts of this bill are, and I'm going to explain this again in the way that I understand for Energy 101, and that is if you think of a stick of dynamite, that is energy confined. As long as there's no blasting cap on it, as long as there's no heat added to it, anything to accelerate an explosion, it's perfectly fine to have that. Battery storage facilities are energy confined. Under this bill, you can place a battery storage facility within 150 feet of a property line. There's no exclusions. So you have a residential area, a suburban area, a cul-de-sac, and maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the bill would allow it. You could have an energy storage facility 150 feet away from someone's property line. And that also would include things like a nursing home. There's no exclusions in that. There is no money in the bill that allows for fire services to be trained appropriately. If you have a fire at an energy storage facility, 75% of fire services in Illinois are volunteer. So you have people who are not trained to fight those fires, with no money included in the bill for equipment, and no money for the chemicals. So it's separate chemicals that have to be used when you're fighting that kind of and I'll put one more point on this just so people get a good mental picture of the danger in what I'm talking about. If anyone has seen an electric vehicle fire, you can push that electric car into a lake. It will sink to the bottom of the lake and continue to burn. So you know that you have to have specific chemicals for this. The bill allows for the siting of these battery storage facilities, but gives no money for safety of the people of Illinois. So it's a rate increase. I believe it's an increased danger to our people, and it took the caps off. So we don't know how high the rate increases will go.
Well, that's
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Well, I guess the only silver lining I can think of is that they lifted the nuclear moratorium in that bill, but that's not really a silver lining, is it? I mean,
no, we had, I'm going to say 3. Really, there were only 2. We had 3 hearings. The hearings lasted about 3.5 hours to 4 hours each. There were 15 panels in each of those hearings, with like 3 or 4 people on each panel. Each person was given 3.5 minutes to speak. So as we were trying to break all of these things down, the nuclear question kept coming up over and over again. I'm an all-inclusive energy supporter. I live in coal country. I represent the area of Illinois that contains the Illinois-Indiana oil basin. So we have almost as much oil and natural gas in Illinois as North Dakota. A lot of people don't know that. But we want nuclear. As CEJA goes into effect, they're going to be shutting down the major energy producer for all of Southern Illinois and all the way up into like Kankakee. So when that shuts down, we're going to need nuclear. Over and over again, we told the sponsors of the bill that the language was not right to remove the moratorium. At the last minute, they did change the language to basically what is in Senator Resin's nuclear bill. So that the language is right now, but you still have to go through the ICC to get all of the permitting. And the ICC is made up of individuals who are placed there who are not nuclear friendly. So even though the language is there to do it, I have serious concerns about whether or not it will be done, simply because we have people at the ICC who are not friendly to nuclear. So time will tell whether or not this was smoke and mirrors. We have the right language though now.
well, hey, one last question on that, and we'll go to mass transit. The nuclear is not, the 5 elected or unelected bureaucrats, as they call them, of the ICC are appointed by the governor, this governor.
Yes.
So that changes with the governors, is that right? So
Yes, it does.
right now, they are 5 people who do not like nuclear and do not like coal and do not like natural gas and that sort of thing. And I'm not leading down anything other than the fact that the ICC makes that sole decision.
Well, there are hoops to jump through, but
Okay.
they will have to ultimately do approve the permitting for where these sites will go. And I'm not saying that they won't permit it, because they could. I'm just saying that it's possible that they would not, simply because we could not nail them down to saying, yes, we need to have more nuclear. And I would say to manufacturers who are on here, our biggest concern going forward, of course, is going to be about data centers and about AI. And I attended the CSG meeting. That's the conference of state governments. It was the Midwest version in Canada back in July, I think it was in July. So Midwestern government officials from Canada and the United States. The whole conversation was about the fact that we have to move nuclear forward, because as data centers and AI come online, they're going to become more and more efficient. That's not more energy efficient. It's more efficient in that it will move faster and do more. By doing that, becoming more efficient, they need more energy. So what we're seeing right now in the PJM market, which is the Chicagoland area, is Virginia sucking up all of the energy. In fact, Maryland, who's spending billions of dollars putting in transmission lines so that they can get the energy from nuclear facilities in their region, Maryland is angry because Virginia is taking all of the energy. And so, in Illinois, if PJM or MISO determines that there's an energy, the supply demand problem becomes greater and greater as AI and data centers become more efficient.
Okay, well, thank you. You broke up just a little bit. I think we got it though.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We knew they were going to pass a mass transit funding package.
Yeah.
At some point, we didn't know what tax and fee increases were going to be in there, even until the last minute. For our TMA members who are basically in the Chicagoland area, what can you explain what this means to them, this mass transit funding package?
Yeah, I'm gonna try, but I live deep downstate,
Okay.
and I almost, as a legislator, even though I have to make decisions for the whole state, I was just like, let the suburbs in Chicago work this out. But in the end, anyone who is really outside of Chicago, I'm going to say got screwed, right? So there will be rate increases for riders on mass transit. It won't happen, I believe, for 1 year, which in the politics of what we do, there's rhyme to reason. And that rhyme to reason is the majority of the folks who live in Chicago, 105 who live either in the city of Chicago or very close surroundings. So they're trying to take care of the city of Chicago. The suburban folks are going to be paying increased rates. It'll be a year from now when we're past the election cycle, right? So I'm a believer that anyone who voted for this mass transit bill should be voted out of office. So it is so harmful to the rest of the state, in particular my part of the state, because the formula for how motor fuel tax is dispersed was changed. The sales tax on motor fuel tax will now be diverted to the city of Chicago. The interest on the sales tax money is also going to be diverted to CTA. So what we basically have is the entire state bailing out very poor management of the Chicago Transit Authority, very poor management of the city of Chicago. Now, I'm a downstater who loves the city of Chicago. So I'm not one of those that wants to be separated from Chicago, but I also don't want to pay for mismanagement anywhere. So I would say to the suburban folks who are listening, or those who are doing business in Chicago or in the Chicagoland area, the mass transit bill is going to do a lot of harm to the pocketbooks of people who live outside the city of Chicago. Because let's face it, I asked a question in committee where I said, can you please tell me who in mass transit in Chicago still pays? Because so many people actually are excluded from having to pay. Not that some of those entities are not worthy of having some benefits. I think veterans, senior citizens, anybody who's on SNAP. So I started adding up all of the people who don't pay. And I think the ones who do pay are probably the ones who are on this on the Zoom meeting today. So
Hmm.
not only are you paying, but you're going to be paying more.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Um, well, with everything that's gone on, I'll before we give it back to Rich here for our TMA members to ask questions that they've typed into the chat box. Do you have any advice for us for the next year on any of this?
Well, obviously, like what I've been saying to folks here, it's the obvious stuff, right? If you have the ability on the energy portion, if you have the ability to do anything to modernize, to create less use, certainly do that. I think because this was done, the energy bill was done at 4 a.m. On the last day of veto session. It's common to have something like that happen on the last day of spring session. It's not common to have it done during veto session. It is common to do it on a Thursday or Friday late into the day so that it misses all of the media, right? So people wake up the next morning, they don't really know what's going on. It takes them a few days to catch up. By Monday, they really haven't caught up, and then it's out of the news cycle, right? So I would say to people right now, if your legislator voted for the energy bill or the mass transit bill, you should let them know how dissatisfied you are with what they did. Number one, because they gave you a massive tax increase, and number two, because they gave you a massive energy increase, and they did it in the wee hours of the morning so that they were hopeful that you would not hold them accountable. And then, like I said, the obvious things are if you have the ability to, do some things that modernize your technologies so that you don't use as much energy, do that. I wish I'm a good news kind of person. Like I'm not even a glass half full person. I'm a glass full, pressed down, shaken, and running over into my lap person. But I don't have good news for anyone for anything that came out of veto session. So I would say if your legislator voted for any of this stuff, make sure they know that you're unhappy because there has to be trailer bills to both of these pieces of legislation. They were so massive and they were done in such quick fashion that you always find mistakes in them. So there are massive mistakes in both of these bills. There will have to be trailer bills, and your legislators have to hear why you're dissatisfied.
That's a good point. So that will, those trailer bills, we call them in the General Assembly, will be coming up probably next spring, and they will
Mm-hmm.
be connected to everything. They'll be talking about energy trailer bills, and the legislators need to know how we feel on the main
Yeah.
energy they voted on, or the mass transit.
Well, we have a little bit of time in regard to the energy bill. We don't have time in that you're not getting any rate decreases, but we have time on the rate increase portion because, that really most of it doesn't go into effect till June 1. And so we have a little, I say we had time to do this energy bill and do it right because
Mhm.
we had until June. I believe we had time to do the mass transit bill and do it right because the cliff now has moved so drastically, and the cliff went from, $1 billion to like 200 million, which in the whole scheme of a $52.5 billion budget, $200 million is insignificant. That
Mhm.
hole could have been filled. It didn't have to be filled at between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. on the last day of veto session. So we do have some time to fix some of this in the spring session.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, David. All right, now it's time for questions and answers with TMA members. For those of you on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your questions, submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, we already have a couple of questions for Senator Bryant. Staying on energy, we have a question from actually a member from Rockford, I believe, who has Senator Stottleman in his district. And I think he's a little confused because he said, Senator Stottleman said SB 25 was passed to, quote, drive down utility costs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the question is, Senator Stoutland and a lot of the folks sponsoring the bill talked about all these great ways they were going to drive down utility costs. But what we're hearing from you today is the exact opposite. I mean, who can you believe on this issue, and why are they trying to make this claim?
So Senator Stoutland is a true blue believer in wind and solar. And I think he's a wind and solar guy as only wind and solar, right? Maybe, maybe he will include some other things for a small amount of time, but he wants wind and solar. I don't want to speak for him, but that has been my experience with him. So when I first started talking about this, I think I used the word projection. So in CEJA, it was projected that this and this and this would happen, and then we wouldn't see rate increases of more than blah, 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 right? $4.35, I think is what it was. Then the excuse that gets used that we're seeing higher energy costs is data centers started to come online and AI, came more into focus. Well, the projections that are made with Senate Bill 25 are the same people who made those projections on the CEJA bill. We don't know. They don't know. When you're making projections that say this won't happen or this will happen, you're just using the tools that you have at hand. And just like no one foresaw the amount of energy, or they should have, but didn't foresee the amount of energy that data centers would take or AI, we also don't know what might happen in world affairs. We don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East. We don't know what's going to happen if, if Virginia continues to pull energy off the PJM grid. We just don't know. So when Senator Stoutland and folks who are continuing with this mantra, they're talking about possible decreases in 5 to 7 years, not immediate decreases. 5 to 7 years if rainbows, palomino ponies, and popsicles all come to fruition. If they don't, then we're going to see a guaranteed rate increase. Thus, my question to him, in looking at page 212, line 2, there's a guaranteed rate increase in the bill. There is no guaranteed rate decrease anywhere in the bill. It's just projections, and that would be 5 to 7 years from now.
Thanks, Senator. Really quickly, Senator, can you explain, I know you've mentioned CEJA several times, and I think some of our members know, but many of them probably don't. Can you just explain? I know it was several years ago when they passed CEJA and what the idea was behind that.
Yeah, so the idea of CEJA, it really is an anti-coal, pro-wind and solar bill. It mandates that all of the coal-fired plants have to come offline by dates relatively certain. It begins in 2030 and then ramps up 2035, 2040. There are some mandates in there that say that coal plants can remain open for to 2035, 2040 if they're able to sequester certain amounts of CO2. Sequestration is still unproven science. Their ADM had a leak, if you remember, a couple of years ago. There's also a place at Prairie State Energy, which is in Marissa. I represent that plant. Prairie State Energy provides energy for all of Southern Illinois, with the exception of a couple municipal providers, and then all the way up to Kankakee. Once that goes offline, it actually throws the MISO region into a third world country as far as energy goes. So CEJA did great harm, I believe, to the state of Illinois because we are not prepared as a state yet to go offline for coal and natural gas. It also has some components. CEJA had some components that force natural gas to come offline as well. So there's still some questions about if you're in an area that has nuclear energy and nuclear goes offline, you need a black start facility to restart a nuclear facility. That's a nuclear gas plant. And there aren't enough protections for those natural gas facilities to bring the nuclear facilities back online again. And I'm using very broad strokes here because we're limited on time. But the fact is that CEJA, I believe, has put us on a path that will not give Illinois the energy that we need going forward in the future. We have to have nuclear, and we still need to have coal and natural gas for a long time into the foreseeable future. So we'll be able to get rid of it at some point, but not yet.
Got it. Thanks, Senator. Well, it's that time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Just before we leave, Senator, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members?
Well, I wish you all well, and I would say if I can help you in any way to get you connected with whoever you need to speak to on the issues for your manufacturing. I represent some pretty large manufacturers: Continental Tire, Gilster Mary Lee, Prysmian, who actually Prysmian now just expanded, and they'll be supplying the cable that goes to the data centers and stuff. If I can't help you, I'll get you connected to whoever can help you, and happy to do that. Just give me a call.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Senator.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that'll do it for today's virtual briefing. I want to thank Senator Terri Bryant of Murphysboro for joining us today, along with TMA State Lobbyist David Curtin for leading a wonderful discussion. Of course, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took time out of their day to join us today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Goodbye.